to the Digital Stories webinar. Just mention we're expecting a few more folk may come in as we get going, so forgive me if there's noises you get hearing. But it gives me great pleasure to bring this, the first Placemakers webinar that we're doing for as part of a collaboration between Glasgow School of Art and Charts. One thing I would request from this point on is that all attendees turn videos and audio off, just so that the panelists become the only ones who can become visible. And as things move forward, we'll be able to hear different presentations and the discussions going forward. The reason that these events are taking place is because, as I was mentioning, there's a collaboration between myself from Glasgow School of Art. My name is Dr. Michael Pierre Johnson, and with Charts, we're working with different representatives from the membership of Chart, with a working group, to really look at engaging the wider membership of creative practitioners and cultural organisations across Argyll and Isles in order to understand what support can be better brought, what great stories, what great experiences are happening out there, and therefore better position Charts in the near future to support the work that creative practitioners need and want to do. So this is the first of 5 themed webinars and workshops we'll be doing. Thursday will be the workshop for digital stories that is seeking to just stimulate ideas, proposals, share stories. And we do actually have a pot of funding at the end of this process for people to propose creative collaborations under the theme of placemaking. So we'll share more information about that at the end of the session. But ultimately, we've received funding from Creative Scotland under the Create Networks Fund. We're looking to distribute into sort of 3 placemaking proposals across the region, but other proposals that come in can also inform wider funding opportunities that Charts will help attract into the area. So without further ado, the agenda for today, we have people from Mull of Kintyre Music Festival who will be sharing their experience of going virtual for the very first time this year due to the COVID-19 circumstances we all find ourselves in. And we'll be sharing a video that shows a bit of the behind the scenes, what happened during the festival, and then we'll do a Q&A with 4 members from that panel. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. And then following that, we'll have James Coots from Charts. He's the communications coordinator, I believe, or officer. And he'll be sharing some of the experience he's had in doing one-to-one sort of social media and digital support for members of Charts, knowing the common sort of needs and some of the solutions and tips behind that. And finally, we have Hannah Clinch from Tacit, who'll be sharing more of the designer's perspective on how to get the most out of digital assets and sharing some of the projects she's involved in along those themes. So firstly, could I ask each of Ian, Raymond, James, and Alex in that order to introduce themselves and what role they have in relation to Mull of Kintyre Music Festival?
Hi, I'm Ian Johnston. I'm the event manager for the Mull of Kintyre Music Festival.
Great.
Hi, I'm Raymond Hosey. I'm a photographer and part-time videographer. I've been working with Mockfest for the past 5 years, documenting the festivals.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Murdoch. I am a committee member on Mockfest and was able to help this year a little bit.
Hi, I'm Alex Witherspoon and I'm part of Raval, and I was also playing with the Sláinte Mhair All-Stars this year.
Perfect. Thanks very much, guys. Just one little note for all the attendees. Through the chat function, please feel free to submit or type questions as presentations are going. And at the end of the session from 8 till 8:30, we've got a little discussion where we can address some of those questions as they come in. But throughout the whole proceedings, for any of the new people who have joined, we're just asking that people turn off their videos and microphones to keep this a fairly standard, simple affair. So without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen and playing a little video for the first time, a premiere of behind the scenes at Mock Music Festival. So here we go.
This hand, they're coming out of this mouth, made by this tongue. I tell you now, my name is Young. Though he's thinking it's your destiny to get the best of me, but I suggest if you quiet, bro, don't even try from the east to west of me. Checking it, never breaking it, cause I'm not faking it. Moving it, now it's grooving it, cause I'm not taking it. Pulling out rhymes and books out the shell. Wanting ignorance and how to start to go on myself. This is no cold rhyming, no frills, no flubs. There's no accident of these rhymes sound tough. Going out, baby, there's no turning back. Come on your TV, on your album cassette, they track. When my show's finally finished up, I'm taking my vow. My name is Young, and yo, I got no hair. You know what I'm saying? I get by I get high. Oh, I'm gonna try. Waves, cause one day look at you and zip you away. When the books leave harbor, sail out to sea. The only thing beyond my mind is me. When the books leave harbor, sail out to sea. The only thing beyond my mind is you and me. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. So we'll be talking now with some of the people who helped organize Mockfest there, which we got a flavor of, and also with Alex, one of the performers, during the, was it a weekend? Was it during a week, Ian?
It was a 5-day, it was all spread over 5 nights, 5 concerts over 5 nights. Took about 3 to 4 weeks to film it all and record it all. But
cool. So could I start actually with yourself then, Ian, just to get the Q&A underway? Firstly, could you tell us a little bit about the background and history of Mock Music Fest, and then why you decided to push through and go virtual this year?
The music festival has been going now for 28 years, and it's always been a live event. Started off as a two-day event, has now spread up to over 5 nights. And this year, unfortunately, we had to make a decision that we couldn't go ahead with it. And so from that, we then decided, well, we wanted to put on something over the 5 nights, just to give people something to watch. And we thought, let's go for either a live stream or a virtual event. So the next step after that was really to look and see what was technically possible and what would the manpower to actually do.
Okay, and how did you go about planning for a festival in this way when I imagine you've not really had much experience in it before?
The first thing I did was contact James Murdoch to see what his thoughts on it were. I think I'll have to let James jump in now.
Yeah, Ian contacted me and said he had an idea and basically asked what he thought we would be capable of doing. We knew we could put something together, but I don't think we quite anticipated what we were going to end up putting together. Certainly from a planning point of view, the most vital thing was finding, for me anyway, somewhere we could actually do the virtual studio, somewhere we could safely put musicians and the team in with them. Once we'd found that, it was just a case of seeing how much equipment we could get and source locally and what expertise we could source locally as well. The decision of live streaming or pre-capturing or even doing a mixture of both was very much made on keeping it as straightforward as possible, because we didn't have experience of doing this, and the most straightforward to do is to pre-capture it all and edit it and have it all ready to go even before the festival itself has started.
Mm-hmm. And were there any challenges or elements of it that you didn't anticipate, things that you learned along the way?
Well, I learned how to do editings on videos, which I'd never really done much of before. I also learned that no matter how much time I left, I still needed at least 4 hours for every video, which was a shock because I was anticipating it taking quite a while, but didn't quite anticipate how long it would take. At that point, it's great because I can bring in Raymond, because he really came in and did a lot of was able to take a lot of that off my hands and let me concern myself with audio capture and with then putting everything up online.
Mm-hmm. Raymond, he's brought you in. I'm going to bring you in as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would be something similar for myself with the visual side of things, trying to then jump into the audio side and learn everything from scratch. So I can really sympathise with James having to deal with that, and everything seems straightforward. You know, you download a few programs, start editing, things like that, but it does take a lot of time. And especially when you've got so much footage, and out at the base they had quite a few cameras set up. So when you're getting all that together and try to put it together properly, edit it, and then render out a video, it takes a lot longer than you think. So that's, as I said, that's where I kind of popped in, took a wee bit of the weight off them, thankfully. Yeah.
So Alex, I'll bring you in at this point, because I imagine this was the first time you were involved in a virtual festival and pre-recording like this. So how was the experience for you doing it in this way?
I mean, it was obviously like very strange, because as a performer, you kind of feel that the audience is what makes such a great atmosphere. So to like be finishing and not hearing a cheer or a clap or whatever was obviously very weird. But at the same time, I did enjoy it, because I was one of the ones that really enjoyed like watching musicians that were doing concerts from their living rooms and live music and everything like that. So to like know that you're now a part of that and there are people watching it from really all over the world, because also like not everybody can like make it to Mockfest. So like for all like the audiences from different countries, like to know that they're watching it as well is pretty cool. So it wasn't all bad.
No, great. And have you had people from other countries approaching you or commenting, or have you found you've been in conversation with people that you wouldn't normally?
Yeah, definitely. We've had like, especially in the Reval page, like we've had loads of people from like Canada, Hawaii, America, like all corners of the world that you just like, you wouldn't expect, like, because, you know, we're still like, we've not made it as much as we want to yet. We were hoping that this would be a big year, but obviously COVID had other plans. But you know, like, it was definitely cool to like be hearing from like people that you wouldn't normally hear from if you were doing like live events. So online is definitely, it's good to it.
Great. I'll bring in the technical guys again, because you mentioned you've had to learn a lot of new things yourself and take time to learn those things as well. Did you find you were bringing any other new people to help with that, or were you accessing resources, other elements to help you with that process? I'll ask Raymond first.
Me myself, no, I kind of work myself anyway on my own through my photography. The videography side of things for me is more of a hobby. So the main thing for me really learning wise was to maybe turn over a bit quicker. So I did have to do a little bit of research on some of the aspects of putting videos together, just to kind of try and speed up the process a wee bit. Because Ian was very keen. There'd be phone calls every night. I've got another idea for another video. Do you think we can do this? Do you think we can do that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And fair play to him. You know, he did a lot of the kind of background work and made it easier for me. So I was essentially just putting things together on the computer, essentially. So yeah, I did learn a little bit and enhance my own skill a wee bit. Yeah.
So I'll go to you next, Ian, actually, in terms of bringing in new people, because I imagine as a promoter, that also needed new ways of promoting and new ways of connecting.
Well, what happened was, with another hat, I worked with the local marketing organisation, Explore Guitar and Gear, and we were in discussions with Caledonian McBrain at that point about them coming in to help market Kintyre. So they came and said, well, we'll help promote the virtual Mockfest. They loved the idea of it. So they then came up with some ideas to us, and one of them was the broadcast to the International Space Station, and then they came up with the idea of doing a live session over at Devar Island in front of the lighthouse. So they sort of landed that in my lap. So I picked two of them, and then that's when I went back to James, I went back to the band, I went back to Raymond and says, can we actually do this? And we managed to record the sort of the Devar Island set in a window. I think it was one day when it was actually a nice weather to get over onto the island, because you can walk onto the island and walk back off again. So with a 6-hour period to walk onto the island or get taken onto the island, do the recording, back off again. James was away beside the chickens, away in the background, so he could do the sound right, and Raymond was doing all the recording in the front. And we had another local guy, Mark Leishman, helping with the sound and that. And then with as far as the Machrihani's Air Base was concerned, that linked in with the whole space station idea, because they're trying to become one of the spaceports. So then they gave us what the officers' mess as a venue for free for 3 weeks. That was great, because it meant we could then, as James said, have a safe place to record local artists. And we'd artists that travelled down from across Argyll, which was great. And I think that a lot of them actually liked the idea of actually seeing each other again for the first time in months. So it was working with different partner organisations helped actually generate new ideas, and it helped. I think it helped make the event a bit more unique, I would say.
No, great stuff. James, so I'm wondering, what would you pinpoint are the new sort of skills you've developed because of this experience that you'll take going forward?
Well, certainly a lot more to do with video editing. It was something I'd sort of dabbled with slightly in the past, but never to this extent. So there's quite a lot of that. Even the actual capture element of things, which is a whole different ball game. I've got a bit more of an idea now about what I'm actually doing. I'm still going to ask Raymond for a lot of help, but I've got at least a starting point now. I know roughly where to point the cameras, and usually remember to hit record. Other things for me, actually, to be honest, we're using Facebook and online sources, not really as just a sharing means or just a reflecting means, but actually firing out original content on that is actually a lot more nerve-wracking than I expected it to be, waiting for something that you've scheduled to start and that people are tuning in to watch and seeing if it's actually going to start. I had to deliberately take myself out of the house the first evening so as I wasn't there footering and fidgeting with things, because I would probably have ended up deleting it all. But it was that was actually the closest thing of the whole week to doing a real performance was that sort of 5 seconds just when it still starts to kick in.
I know what that feels like right now.
Yeah.
So, well, actually, I was interested in the video footage. There's drone footage, and some like the production value at some of those locations was really strong. Was that yourselves that learned how to do that, or did you bring in someone else technically?
That would be myself. I trained for what's called a PSEO, or it's not technically a license, but a commercial license to fly drones. So I added that to my photography business first of all, and that's actually how I first got involved in video editing, because I never dabbled in video before that. So I gradually kind of started making a few little videos just from the drone, which kind of snowballed into a couple of years later. I was filming the Mockfest every year for Ian, which worked out really good this year. Obviously, with things as they were, we had 3 years worth of footage archived, pretty much. From every single night, I think, for the past 3 years. And most of it had never been seen before, so it was all fresh content. Well, other than being seen live, it was all fresh content. But yeah, I was definitely going to take it. It's not very, although Devar Island's only a few miles down the road, it's not very often I actually go over and visit the island. So I thought, no, definitely going to take the drone with me and capture some of those kind of amazing views from over there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it really worked well, which takes me to my next question, which I'll bring Alex you back into this as both a performer and I imagine a sort of viewer of the rest of some of the festival as well. What do you feel worked really well bringing the festival online, and what do you think you would take forward as well, both for yourself or approaching other things?
I think like just the fact that we were even able to do it online is amazing. Like giving people a little bit of entertainment during like really hard times, obviously. And I definitely think that could be something that can be carried on. Like hopefully next year things will be back to normal. It'll be like a proper festival again, but like definitely like just recording as much as possible. So maybe like people that don't feel like they want to go to the actual festival or be part of the crowd they can still enjoy it and watch it. So I think it is definitely good that like just get as much of an audience as possible, really. So that's definitely worked really well. And
do you think there's sort of digital elements you would add for your band, or that we're speaking to other bands that you think they would take on forward?
I mean, I suppose so, yeah. Like, I mean, I'm not overly sure in the whole like digital side of it, to be honest, but I think just the fact that it's all been recorded and everything, that is brilliant, and it just means that you can also go back and like rewatch things that you've done in the past. So I think, yeah, it is just brilliant.
Great. And I'll ask that question of yourself, Ian, as well. What, being the organizer, what you felt really worked well and that you'll take forward for future festivals?
I think we're learning right away when James said let's pre-record everything. It gave us I think it actually freed us up to bring a lot more into the festival, and it meant we could plan it better. And what we've got now is, as Alex said, is we've got like 5 concerts. There's about 10 hours of concerts there that's going to be there forever now. And it means it's almost like captured a moment of time where different bands have come along. Some of them have sent in footage. Some of them a lot of them went out and recorded for us. So I think overall it was just, and as Raymond said as well, it was tapping into some of the footage that we've had because otherwise it was sitting in hard drives in my office, and so it was nice to actually get a reason to use it. And I think we've learned from that is, like, in the future, I think actually even looking at the footage we've taken is, in the future, how we sort of light it again, how we actually take the footage, and then from that, how we will use it again at a post-festival. So it's been quite a learning experience. And hopefully next year, maybe looking at maybe doing a live stream of one of the events. That would really be something that we'd like to do if possible.
Okay, doke. And how about Raymond, James? What ambition has it given yourselves technically of what you want to achieve next time round, or in other work you're involved in? Have you hatched plans to try things a different way in future?
I don't know. I think if we were going to do something again, I would certainly be looking at probably trying to get an actual dedicated team to do things. Certainly in a normal festival scenario, there's a lot of us who are able to do bits and pieces, but we're going to be spread amazingly thin to do that. So I think if we were going to do something, it would be quite nice to get a team in place for that. Outside of the festival, I think it does open up a wee possibility for us again when things return and people are able to do performances, that we can actually begin to create show reels or create concert highlight reels from all this footage, and maybe use other events, other concerts in the area to try and promote us, as well as using our existing footage. I think that would be a good thing, because we now know certainly the work involved, or we've got a much better idea of it, as well as the turnaround time that Raymond was talking about there. Turnaround, certainly in the way I'm used to working, the audio is quite quick. The video turnaround is a lot longer, but we did manage to get it quite. I mean, we were shifting towards the end of it. We'd worked it out.
Yeah. I think in the future, I had a brief discussion with Ian, possibly looking at maybe getting the Mockfest its own camera capable of doing live stream, and possibly setting that up for the kind of main concerts, maybe the Saturday and Sunday nights, putting them on YouTube, and possibly even generating a little bit of revenue through that with a private stream. Would be something I think could work, as Alec had mentioned. There's a lot of people who've got connections to Campbeltown and the music festival who obviously can't come every year. You know, it is a long way to travel. So having that option to kind of tap into a live stream could be beneficial for everybody, you know, as well as the Mockfest itself. Yeah.
And just out of interest, have you found yourself talking to other music festivals across the region? Because there is a handful, isn't there? And other technicians, have any of them approached you about how it worked out, and what questions were they asking if they did get in touch?
Well, I know quite a few other organisers, and I've spoken quite a bit with Ross Coots. I deal with Ross Coots at Gig in the Goyle. But I've not, and I saw what we did before. I've actually watched some of the live streamed events that we've seen, and it would be an interesting conversation to actually have, you know. And now we've got our own experience. We've not had too much at the moment, but it'd be good to actually speak with them and see how other festivals felt it, what worked and what didn't work. So yeah, it's a conversation that we could definitely have in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the last sort of question I want to ask from everyone is to share a tip or insight that they would give for anyone with similar ambitions to bring their cultural event online. So I'll start with yourself, Alex, and then we'll move back up to Ian. But Alex, is there any tips for performers that you would give going virtual in the future?
I do think that like social media is great. Just like advertising is key to get as like wide in the audience as you can, and really just enjoy it, because I'll tell you, I will never take a live performance for granted ever again. Like, it was so weird, like just not having the audience to kind of like bounce off if you get me. So yeah, just enjoy it and advertise as much as you can, really.
Great, thanks, Alex. James, any tips?
Get it done as early as possible. That's all from me, thank you.
I was going to say my big thing is planning. So I don't know if I'd mentioned, but I came in quite late to the project and started with the Var Island session. So for me, turning up at a strange location, we haven't really worked for months. The main thing for me was having all my own equipment and everything all prepped, ready to go. So I'm very much check all your gear. So when you turn up one location, you can just get working. You're not having to think about cameras or anything like that. You can just roll with the punches and deal with any problems that pop up, and hopefully get a good result at the end of it because you're prepared.
Always good advice. Any tips?
Well, I would say basically just make sure you've got a good team round about you, because I mean I come up with the original idea for a virtual festival, but which maybe helped kickstart the whole thing off, but I could never have managed it without all the team round about me, the technical guys round about me, and the bands that actually came together, and because we pulled together the Slanted of our All Stars, it's like Stephen Johnson come in and contact the time, and he pulled together like an 8-piece band for us, and they had the rehearsal was them actually playing really, so it was yeah, it's just getting the right people round about you.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution, for your reflections. Just a reminder to those who are attending, feel free to submit some questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to address them at the end. But otherwise, one last thank you for everyone from Muckfest. Really appreciate you taking your time to share your thoughts and experiences with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next presentation is from James Coots at Charts. So I'll let him introduce himself and what he'll talk about for the next 10 minutes. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm James Coots, and I'm Communications Coordinator for Charts. Earlier this year, we asked our members to take part in a survey to find out how their practice was impacted by the pandemic and the skills that they wanted to improve. And their feedback basically said that they wanted to improve skills in areas such as online sales, marketing, and social media. So with that in mind, we started to offer some free one-to-one social media tune-up video calls to provide members with some tailored advice. And when each member booked into a session with me, they provided an outline of what aspect of social they wanted to cover in the call. And I did about an hour of research looking at what each caller was currently doing online. The calls were really short. They were about 30 minutes. So they were quite intense sessions. I've done 10 calls so far. And I spoke to, amongst others, painters, musicians, jewelers, producers, and visitor attractions. And what I've done for tonight is I've gone back through my notes from each call and grouped together the main aspects of social that the members wanted to speak about. So I'm just going to share my screen and go to my slides. Bingo. Okay, so the main things, the main topics that they wanted to talk about were things like, who is my current audience? How do I reach new audiences? What could I do to increase engagement? How can I use social to increase online sales? And how to make the most of my time? So what I wanted to talk about was some of the suggestions that I had for each of those areas, along with a few examples. So for who's my current audience, to reach new audiences, I'm a really big fan of knowing who your current fan base is. And when I spoke to the members, I mentioned things like you can use tools like Facebook Insights. And this is a screenshot from Facebook Business Suite, which only launched late last month. And you can get an audience report like this to discover gender, age, location, and Instagram and Twitter offer something similar. The reason it is good to know about who your fan base is now is that you can start to think a bit more about who do I want to know about me, and who should be there but isn't. So what I mean by that is anyone missing. So For some of the members I spoke to, they wanted to increase their profile with particular types of people. For example, those working nearby in community arts, other artists in Scotland, or UK-based art buyers. So keeping the question, who do I want to know about me, in mind can be really helpful when looking at things like your stats, to start thinking about the audiences you want to grow. So the next thing I was going to talk about was how do I reach new audiences? In terms of reaching new audiences, I mentioned a few tips to members that are simple or take some legwork. It's really basic things are things like asking others to post about your work and then doing the same for them on their social is one idea. This could be someone who's bought a piece of your artwork and if you're looking to grow the number of art buyers following you, another art buyer talking about your work can help. You'll reach people in their network, and you can also share this content on your channels. A really important idea is to plan in time to do listening. And what I mean by that is spending time reading your feeds to see what is happening online. And you can then engage with other people and like and share and comment their posts. And that helps you to discover ideas for your future social content and your work. And you might find other potential partners for future projects or other places that might write about your work. And it makes you more connected to your current audiences and what is happening. An example of this kind of listening is I do this for charts. Using things called lists on Twitter. And that means that you can listen to a particular group of people. And on the slide, I'm showing me following the steering group for charts. And that helps me to basically stay in the loop about what their organizations are up to. And then I can then use that to stay informed. And then I can also like and share interesting posts that they've sent out to our membership. So yeah, I'm a big fan of marking listening time on your calendar, and I know it's hard to make time for things like this, but it's really important in my view. Next thing, what can I do to increase engagement? To try to increase the engagement levels for their posts, so things like more likes, more comments, more shares. Most of the suggestions I had for the members were about doing some thinking about the content that they might post. And for example, before you put together a post, do you think it's a good story or interesting? And if you do, you're more likely to get others liking, commenting, and sharing. Another idea, make your social audience feel special. Reveal more about your life and what you've been doing behind the scenes in developing your work. And this helps your fans to feel more connected to you. An example of this, this is top left is a maker who's sharing video of her new studio, which is quite a common lockdown post I noticed for members. And Jenna uses video work very well to talk about what she's up to. And bottom right is Dot.Sim, who's showing some mark making that she's doing on the beach in Tiree. So again, it's kind of behind the scenes, revealing more about where they are and what they're doing. Another way to increase your engagement is to think about the language that you're using. So, is the language you're using a good fit for the audiences you want to reach? And what I basically mean is to make sure you're speaking their language. So use slang and jargon if you know that's a good fit, and don't if it's not. And also to think about whether you want your posts to be really entertaining, or perhaps if you want them to be more information based. So just think about what works best. A quote I used a lot by a designer, a guy called James Victoire, which I mentioned to a lot of the members during the calls, is on screen. And this relates to members finding their weirdness. And I'd say that for social posts, if you can put your finger on what your weirdness is and then amplify it, because bland doesn't work on social, that's a nice way of thinking about what you can post and what might work on social. To give you an example, one of the people I spoke to as part of doing these calls was a big fan of the color blue. So we talked about how that could be reflected on her social profiles and in the content that she posted. and another had posts that were really long and read like a dissertation, but they wanted to build relationships with other artists and critics, so that was a good fit for him. And but also it meant that his approach set him apart online. So yeah, if you've got something unique or a way of doing things that's quite unique to you, I'm kind of saying don't be afraid of that. Another thing I talked about is you can ask for help. You can as part of your posts. So that increases your openness, makes you appear more collaborative, and it's less one way, it's more of a conversation. So that's another good tip. In terms of the types of content posted on social, it can be really useful to mix things up and test other types of posts. So on screen, this is a kind of oldie but a goodie. It's something called the periodic table of content marketing, which is a bit of a mouthful at this time of night. But it's got a really useful bit in red, which you probably won't be able to read. But it shows the types of content that you can produce other than simply text, image, or videos. So there's some of the examples in red are you can do things like quizzes, you can do testimonials, you can do how-tos or resources, but it's a nice primer for what else could you do other than the kind of standard post. In terms of how can I use social to increase online sales, I was really impressed by the members I spoke to in terms of what they've been doing online sales-wise. For a few, I recommended making some simple changes to their Facebook page. Really simple things like for this particular jeweler's Facebook page, there's a send message button which sends a message to their messenger. But one thing you can do, which is a really basic tip, is you can change that send message button on Facebook to a Shop Now website link. So you just change the call to action, and it actually can make quite a big difference. A lot of the research in terms of Facebook users says that they don't like leaving the channel to shop. So they don't like leaving Facebook to go somewhere else to shop online. So if you're really active on Facebook, one of the things I spoke about to members with it is that it could be worth testing using Facebook Shop to sell online. Quite a few of the members were making a really great use of comments on Facebook. And customers were asking for basic details about the products they post about. And then those people were then converted into a visit to the page on their website shop. So something as simple as comments can really help online sales. Another member was telling me about the fact that Etsy had changed its algorithm recently, and then she was now getting more sales from that channel compared to the previous year. So constant changes in how these sites work can impact your online sales. So that makes Etsy one to look at. Another tip was to make sure that your about pages and bios include a call to action related to sales. So they include a link to your shop. A really obvious one, when you're posting work that's essentially for sale on social, don't be afraid to mention the price. We had lots of conversations with the members about them being quite worried about doing that, but I think it's really vital to say it's for sale. Okay, last little thing. In terms of ways to make the most of their time, there's obviously a lot still going on this year. So members wanted to find out some shortcuts to make the most of the time they have for social. Linked to what I said earlier about finding your weirdness, coming up with some themes to help you generate post ideas can really help. I use something called Trello, which is on screen, which is like a kind of online post-it note tool. And basically, if you get some ideas for social posts, you can add them to your Trello board. So if you're having a flat day and you're not feeling very creative, but you know you haven't posted on social for ages, you have somewhere to go to help you with an idea to get you off the blank page. For example, some members love things like changing landscapes or windswept beaches or nostalgia. So they can use those as topic headings, so like a column heading in Trello. And then under each of those themes, they could add content ideas for social posts related to those themes. And then they can all sit on Trello and they're basically available for whenever you need some inspiration. And that's a good thing to do. A few of the members I spoke to were really keen to work out how best to select hashtags to use for their posts, essentially to help attract new likes and followers. And the site on screen, which is called displaypurposes.com, is really good for this. It's quite an art and science, hashtags. There's more in their blog posts about that you can see. In terms of making the most of their time, thinking about your posting frequency is a really good one as well. Some of the members I spoke to were posting on social very frequently. And so some of the tips I had were actually to think about whether sometimes it's okay to reduce your frequency. So say, for example, on Facebook, most of the engagement with a Facebook post happens within the first 5 hours. So one of the tips I gave to some of the members were, okay, well, you don't have to post every 10 minutes or every hour on Facebook. How about you space them out or schedule them 5 hours apart? And then that's one way of reducing the social workload. And other channels like Instagram, you can post obviously more often. Twitter even more so, but that's one way of managing your time on social. I hope some of these suggestions were useful. Charts are very committed to helping our members, and I'm available for more social media tune-up video calls. Do get in touch through the Charts website if you'd like to book in a session. Thanks very much.
Magic. Thank you very much, James. That was rich and lots of different perspectives to bring in there. And I like how you drew on some of the experience with Charts members. And it does give you another example that even getting familiar with some of the networking members of Charts and using that to do some desktop research. How do others do it? It's a good resource to kind of to look and ask these questions also. Thank you very much. I do like
thank you.
I do like the quote of your weirdness can become your greatness. I was a very weird kid, but I've yet to achieve the other side of that. But all good. Thank you again. So next, I'd like to introduce Hannah Clinch, and I'll let her introduce herself in more detail and what she'll be talking to us about. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Can everyone hear me all right, I suppose? I just wanted to check in. I'm going to do a presentation that's about 10 minutes, and I've got some slides, and I'm going to just take myself off camera as well whilst I do that presentation. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Anyway, I will share screen first. Okay, so just to contextualize my own practice, I started off over 20 years ago in like textile design, and my first experiences of working were really in trend prediction, fashion and marketing in print. I rapidly discovered that my environmentalism got in the way of pursuing these careers too seriously. And I sort of switched and made a conscious decision to start working with social enterprises and smaller organisations focused on growing the circular economy. I relocated to Dunoon about 10 years ago and had done the classic juggle of children and freelance work ever since. In about 2016, I started to research the support needs of the creative industries in my own hyperlocal context of COW, and set up Tacit as a design agency in response to the findings of some of this research. The research identified gaps in the needs of micro-enterprises and cultural organisations, and particularly for women and freelance workers. Through my design and enterprise practice, I've worked with a number of projects and have had an interface with, I suppose, small cultural heritage organisations, and developed digital assets for the voluntary sector organisations of people working with relatively limited budgets. So I'm going to talk through 3 projects that I hope give you some ideas and insights into the processes and surprises involved in community-based co-production and the creation of digital assets. The projects I'm going to talk through are Dunoon Borough Hall Chronicles, The People of Place, Shopkeepers of Dunoon, and Apparel Exchange, a website and shop. So for those of you familiar with Dunoon, then Dunoon Borough Hall will be well known to you. For those of you who are not, the hall is owned by a community trust, and after years of campaigning, the trust obtained investment to fully renovate the Borough Hall building into a cultural and creative hub. To mark the reopening of the hall, funding from the Heritage Lottery was earmarked to develop a project that engaged the trust's very committed and knowledgeable volunteers in the creation of an artwork. Jenny Hunter, the Borough Hall Arts and Education Officer, asked me to facilitate this project. Initially, the idea was to co-create a site-specific intervention, but because there was uncertainty about the building and some of the use of the spaces, the idea started to change. So I facilitated a few workshops with volunteers to review archive material that they had carefully brought together. And there were some fantastic stories that volunteers started to tell about how the hall had affected their own lives. So ultimately, we wanted to try and find a way of capturing and sharing those insights. The idea of producing a newspaper was suggested and scoped out and planned in collaboration with Jenny. I worked with the volunteers to collate stories and map out content. And then there was an intensive period of research that used the expertise of other community organisations, including the Casa House Museum, a local newspaper archive, local historians John Sterling and Margaret Hubbard, and even Dunoon's Masonic Lodge, which had played a key role in the development of the hall. Over a period of months, articles developed with volunteers and myself, and these were then formatted into a newspaper. Through the collation of research, we made discoveries about the building. For example, I managed to find a picture of the Borough Hall's architect, Robert Bryden, who's shown here on the right. And we figured out that he was actually the Viking in the window of the hall, a fact that had kind of been lost over time. So 5,000 copies of the newspaper were printed. A newspaper stand was put in the hall. The publication was distributed to funders, visitors, and anyone that would take one. The format is relatively cheap to produce and very familiar to people, so dead accessible. In addition to this, the newspaper was also downloadable from the Borough Hall's website. And as part of Doors Open Day this year, we've actually used some tools to just produce an interactive PDF. So the content that was produced sort of 3 years ago is still being used today. So the next project is called The Shopkeepers of Dunoon. I'm really interested in person-centered narratives and how stories of undersung heroines of heroes can help overcome structural inequalities within placemaking. So Claire Harrowbone is our local conservation and regeneration officer, and she manages some of the investment into the local high street here in Dunoon. And I work with her and the Castle House Museum, who are a local heritage organisation again, to support research with multiple members of the community. And we sort of started to gather, I suppose, data, images, stories about shopkeepers. And people contributed them via Facebook. And we also looked at sort of the old archive material that was in the museum and started to formulate these into an exhibition. We collated these into 13 sites, including the museum, and worked with shopkeepers to install window displays along the high street that shared artifacts from the museum and told the story of the people who had occupied the shops. One of the most intriguing discoveries during the research was Miss Margaret Parker. Margaret was mentioned in a 19th century publication about Dunoon businesses. Her entry described how she owned a dressmaking shop and had been awarded what's called a royal patent. In the basement of the museum was a heavy cast iron sign that John, the museum manager, knew would come from the high street. When we cross-referenced the data that we discovered about Margaret Parker and looked at the sign, we realised that the sign in the museum had actually hung above her shop. And so this was displayed as part of the exhibition. The People of Place Shopkeepers map was also designed and printed and was distributed to shops participating in the project. The street level exhibition was only on for a week, so to try and give the project life beyond the exhibition, I created a really simple digital archive. There wasn't enough funding to invest in a more comprehensive searchable catalogue, and unfortunately there isn't anything local that's sort of you can place content like this. But this is just done on, it sits on my website, and there's a really just simple plugin, a gallery plugin that I've used. The final project I'm going to talk about is just working with a small organisation, a social enterprise based in Glasgow called Apparel Exchange. They're a relatively new enterprise, and like a lot of startups, they have like a patchwork of funding to support marketing. So often projects are done in stages that reflect the resources, that reflect the limitations of these resources. An illustrator called Ruth Craddock started to develop a brand that expressed the clothing reuse and the way this connected to young, and to make it in a way that connected to young people. When other bits of funding came into the organisation, it was a case of developing the platform further and adding an online shop. We had to think very carefully about how to do this and think about developing content that was relevant to the organisation's impacts. And we reviewed existing bits of marketing material to help develop the site content. In the case of Apparel Exchange, and the brand and the illustrations Ruth had already developed were utilised on the site. Site content and how you present your offer can profoundly change how people actually access your services, saving your business time and money. However, there are very few shortcuts to getting this right, and content development takes a lot of time to think and plan. It can be really challenging for small organisations to do that bit of development, especially when they're so busy delivering, but it's just something that as someone who's worked with lots of small organisations, I've recognised that that's always not put into briefs and not always fully understood. But anyway, at the end, we ended up with a shop that's now online. And I think when setting up an online shop, you have to think about things like stock control, and you also have to think about customer information, terms and conditions. All of these things sound really standard, and they're again really time consuming to do for small businesses. What many organisations also forget is just how online shops and online content and websites need feeding once they have been put up there. So it's really a case of thinking about how you can maximise those assets, but also thinking about the resources you need to go online as well is something that I think is a bit of a challenge for small businesses and for small organisations. Anyway, all the projects that I've talked about are pretty much on my website. So yeah, happy to have a chat later about things, or just email me any questions or do it in the chat. Okay.
Magic, thank you
Okay.
very much. Kind of really interesting, varied series of projects. And I think touching on something we want to discuss in the next section about how archiving is, the process can really unveil stories and interesting facts as part of it as well. And even just storing things, there's always time to return to them as well, as you were saying from your experience there. So much appreciated for your time there. Okay, I'm going to invite the Mull of Kintyre Music Festival folk to rejoin us as well, because we're now going to open up for half an hour of discussion. We've got a couple of preset questions we're going to explore, but for all those attendees, please continue using the chat function if you want to submit further questions to any of our panelists, or for the wider process with charts as well. We welcome any engagement that we can muster at this stage. So in terms of the discussion, there's two questions we were going to bring to the table. The first was going to be, how are digital resources best accessed or developed in Argyll and Isles? So a broad question, but across context, seeing what is there out there for supporting or reaching that. And secondly, what potential is there for developing or accessing digital archives in the region? From people's experiences from Mull of Kintyre Festival now having already archived some recorded footage, we wanted to explore what does digital archiving really mean in such context. So I'm going to start with that first question: how are digital resources best accessed or developed in Argyll and Isles? And I'm going to start with yourself, Hannah, if I may. Just with your experience of, you were mentioning working with some small organizations and the challenges for some of them to find the time to develop or even the funding to access certain resources. What have you felt have been some of the ways for accessing and developing those assets for them that have worked, or just drawing on your experience?
Well, I think it was time's been mentioned a lot when it's come to digital, and I think fundamentally there is an issue with how much time people think things take versus how much time they actually take. And I say this across social platforms because I think there's a huge pressure for people to be on social media, but the time versus your production time, if you're a small business that's making stuff, then your time to make and your time to market, there's a really difficult balance there to strike. And I think even just making simple photographs and digital content across multiple channels, I think is a bit of a strain on organizations. I mean, small organizations that have access to funding are often lucky in terms of they'll get maybe, I mean, I've seen it a few times, you get a young person in to do a few months of work because there's a funded element to a post or something. And I think, you know, so people can go through highs and lows with that stuff. But I think there are challenges for lots of small, tiny, multiple organizations or working, producing digital content. It's actually the time, and I think the resource is not always there. Funding is not always good in terms of paying for people's time. But I think digital does take time. You know, and that is my big sort of thing. And I think it's the strain it puts on organizations as well, who are perhaps maybe led by boards and want to make decisions about commissioning work. I think as soon as you get multiple people, from a design point of view, as soon as you get multiple people trying to tell you how to design stuff, that is really challenging to manage. And I don't always think it results in the best outcomes for organizations either. So I think sometimes devolving power and certainly doing some of those things that James was talking about in terms of testing your audience, analyzing your audience, and using those tools to actually figure out who you're designing for is really important, because that actually makes it a bit more less personal, shall we say. So yeah, there's some things that I've learned.
No, and I think you're right that there's more resources than ever out there that try to help these types of needs and these types of activities, but learning the best brief you can to work with the designer helps everything, helps probably permit funding as well. If you know what it is you want a designer to do the job for, then that probably saves time and increases the investment of any spend. Okay, I've got a question actually that's come in for James, and it's asking, what tech did you use to live stream the pre-recorded video?
We kept it as simple as possible and basically used the Premiere function on Facebook. So the video was out and rendered in a suitable file size, which we only discovered, I think, a day before we started uploading things. A couple of videos needed shrunk a little bit. And then we'd basically just use the Premiere function. We were really lucky, actually. We used the live stream to the space station event as a test, and we're able to do that along with another promo video just to make sure it all worked. But that was it, simple as possible, using Facebook.
Really good. And actually, it would be good, Ian, to ask a bit more about the impact that having that live stream to the space station, because it was an idea that was brought. Was it from McBrain, Caledonian McBrain, or one of the partners?
It came through from Caledonian McBrain, the media team from Clarion, and just sent some ideas through to us. And I quite liked the idea of, I was looking for something quite quirky to try and promote the event. And Caledonian McBrain, some of their team actually had connections through to NASA, which meant that we knew when we broadcast it, the files that we were going to send through, the tracks we were going to send through, were actually going to be on the space station by that time already. So we did actually, we knew it was actually going to arrive. And through the media team from CalMac, what we actually did was we've just produced some promos. I would do some photographs that we took at the airport, which you saw at the runway, which you saw in some of the footage of. And we put out the press release, and it was picked up by 174 media outlets across the UK. We're into lots of regional newspapers, were into the BBC covered it, STV covered it, all the major media outlets covered it as well. So by the time we'd finished with it, we had with a huge coverage, far more than what we were ever expecting. And then when we did actually broadcast it, so far we've had about 12,000 plus views of the video, which was pretty phenomenal, really. It's much more than what we expected. But it worked out really as a promotion. It was a great promotion. And it helped. It also helped us focus on what we want to do, because of that we needed to create the recording studio to record it. And once we created the recording studio, we could then offer it out to other bands. So it was a mixture of different things all came together. So yeah, it was different what we tried to do, and hopefully we've managed to pull it all together quite well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that idea of it with the question of how you can access or develop digital resources, it's an example of how a partnership from a large organization with smaller organizations can really build a lot. It helps build your audience, builds promotion, because they've got a fundamental resource that if you're able to share and bring that together, that can have relative impact that is invaluable to yourself now, because you've probably grown your audience for the festival just through that act alone. I'm going to go to Raymond next, and I know there was a couple of comments you made in terms of getting new equipment and access to new stuff that you needed to achieve what you wanted to achieve. How hard was that to do, and where did the investment come? How did you go about investing in new equipment for the festival?
Most of it actually I kind of built up through the years, just through my own business and the photography side of things. With Campbeltown being such a remote place, I kind of need to have be a bit of a jack of all trades. So although I started off as a stills photographer, I was only interested in doing landscape photography. I soon was asked to do weddings, portraits, and as I said before, when I first bought the drone 5 years ago, I started making little videos with the drone. They got a lot of attention on Facebook and social media, which then snowballed into actually becoming something I did commercially, and producing some commercial videos for some of the local businesses, tourism partnerships down here, and it just grew and grew from there, to the point where I've got multiple cameras and learning about how to make videos properly, learning a little bit about audio and things like that, which I'm still fairly new at. As I said before, I can sympathise with James. Coming from an audio background and trying to go into a video background, even the switch between stills photography and videography is quite a big jump. Although some of the skills are similar, there's a whole range of things which are dissimilar, and take a lot of research, which goes back to the time thing that was mentioned, that there's so many resources available online. It can be hard, you can get a bit lost sometimes. So it can be hard to find good information online. You can find lots of information, but sometimes it's not easy to find the right information to steer you in the right direction. Hopefully I've kind of managed to find my way through it so far to get to the point where I can produce kind of half decent content, I'd like to think.
Sure. Actually, James, that probably comes into, James Coutts, I should say, comes into what you were talking about, although it was related to sort of social media and tips to use it. The reason you offer this support is because people find it difficult to navigate those resources, how to learn how to use it, what's out there. And how have you found your role at Charts as communications officer has been predominantly helping to sort through all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe one aspect I didn't talk about in my little bit was that a lot of the members I spoke to did have IT niggles, I guess I'd call them. So during my calls with them, a lot would say towards the end of the call, "Oh, my brother-in-law is coming this weekend. Now that we've spoken, I'm going to get him to update my website at the weekend." And frequently during the calls, there was brothers-in-law, or daughters who were going to be roped in to help solve the kind of technical issues that the members had. So that was things like updating. I can't update my website anymore. I've no idea about how I log into my Facebook page, or my website developer built this site, but then I don't have the logins anymore. The developer doesn't exist anymore, and so I can't get access. It's things that probably Hannah's very heard lots of in the past as well, and I'm the same. But I think that the IT issues and I guess related to that, the skills was something that came up quite a lot as well as areas that needed help with. And I think that's again, like what Hannah said, that's a small business thing as well. So yeah, that's some of the things that came up quite a lot.
Can I just go in there as well? I think one of the things that I think I'm really passionate about is peer support, and I think locally I've done sort of quite a lot of personal networking, but also sort of like, I suppose, sort of try to grow my own network. And one of the things that I think certainly this area is probably very typical of many other areas in sort of more rural places, is that I think the people to support are actually in your community. It's just that you're not connecting with them, because a lot of those people, we found some amazing people that do a lot of tech support actually, that I now sort of use to extend sort of projects and ask and sort of have conversation, because actually sometimes you just need a conversation with someone to sort of go, oh, that's the best way of doing it. And I think that's really important to try and pull those technical people out, because often they are looking for work, but they're also looking for ways of sort of growing their own businesses as well. And that's something that I think is really useful to sort of touch base with other people on those things. We've been running a sort of series of local events that's been managed sort of by me and someone else locally, just to try and sort of crack open some of the technical support. And we found a filmmaker that's also got sort of video, and he did a really good just basic workshop and just really nailed down just gave people some simple programs and stuff like that. Just use these because there's so many. And I think they're the sorts of things that actually sometimes narrowing down options for people with this stuff is really helpful, I think, because I think a lot of the people I'm speaking to are just overwhelmed. I think is a lot of it.
Great. And do you think, and this can open up to others as well, that would be a great role for Charts as a network-based organization with members to try and connect some of that peer support, connect some of that word-of-mouth recommendations to those kinds of needs? Or have there been other platforms you've seen that kind of support that quite well, connect that word of mouth quite well?
Michael, I was going to say, I mean, it's an obvious kind of directory type resource in terms of, find the person that can solve that login problem, or who has experience with this particular content management system, or the kind of matching directory thing. I think that would, from the people I've spoken to, I think that would be really useful. And Ian, with Mullock and Tyre Festival, were there any moments where you would have used that sort of peer support, or that you did use that peer support to be like, okay, technical question or other aspects?
I was lucky enough, I suppose, when I managed to pull in that with James and Raymond, that they helped a lot of any issues that we had, and they could actually maybe reach out to people themselves. So I suppose in that way we're fortunate in that way. I see a bit there where Charts could maybe help the music festival in the future, and I think what we would really like is maybe some assistance in how we archive what we've actually got, because we've got together all this footage now, the 3 years of footage plus the concerts that we've got and all the promotions that we've done. It would be good to look to see if Charts could maybe assist with how we actually archive it. We're looking to create our own YouTube channel as one of the means. That could be the means. But how do you even, anyone can set a YouTube channel, but how do you set it up in such a way that it's user friendly and you can access all your footage? And I like the idea, I thought about the idea of maybe Charts could be a conduit towards channeling people. They don't need to actually be the archive, but they can be a place where you can go to and they can pinpoint you to different archives that are around Argyll. It would be good to see examples of the way other people have actually created archives. And from that, you then say, well, this would actually work for us. So it'd be good to set up, maybe partner up with Charts in the future to look at that.
Great. And so on the archives, I'm going to bring you in here, Alex, because you're one of the artists that have been recorded by Mockfest. So they now have you on their archive. do you foresee ways that you would engage with that, use that, develop on that as a band going forward to promote or in other ways?
Yeah, I think like definitely like using like videos that you've got of your band playing is definitely a good way to be promoting yourself, just so like it's not always just photos and people are thinking, right, okay, you're saying this, but how do you actually sound? So like using like all like the footage that we've managed to get, it definitely will be beneficial.
So do you expect in future versions, if it had to be digital or partly digital, you would almost treat them like a production company and start making requests of them, or including your own ideas into how they capture what you do?
Yeah, definitely. I think like, it is important that like you have an input in like what you would like to have your sound like, and that's what like was great about like working with the guys at Mockfest, because it's not just like you're told to do this, that's how you're going to do it, this is what you're going to get. Like they do ask for your input and say like, how does this sound, do you want to make changes and stuff. So like I think the whole committee, like it has got really lucky, like the people that are in it, because it's not just a committee, it's like a committee of good people. So
Great. Yeah, and that trust between
yeah.
is vitally important. So I'll open up the archives question to yourself, James, first. You've got this archive of stuff within Mockfest. What do you see the potential of it? What do you think you can produce with it?
I think the big thing I was sort of looking at using this for, certainly to begin with, would be the likes of quarterly or mid-year, away from total opposite end of the year, away from the festival, start to advertise again, start to use this as a way to get people excited about buying tickets or engaging with the festival next year. Potentially also using it as a way to maybe bring bands on as well, because we can say, well, look, this is the experience you can have. Here's a bit of footage from this, that, the other thing. My big concern with using it, to be honest, is where and how we keep it and share it, because as Ian says, if you've got simplistic ways of doing things with YouTube and having 4 million videos on YouTube, it's not going to help somebody from finding what it is they need to have. Equally, trying to host your own archive, I don't know how feasible that is to keep on doing that and keep uploading and keep sort of an eye on that. For us, I think that would be the type of thing, but as Ian says, with charts, we maybe get some sort of even a direction as to where to go with that would be very handy. Raymond said it himself about his equipment. We're, like most of the communities in Argyll, we're sort of stuck in our own area, so we need to have all our own things. But when we don't have something, or we don't have that person, we do really need that help from outside coming in.
Mm-hmm. And Raymond, with your experience, are you seeing potential? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I would agree with that. The having all the footage archived is fantastic, and it really helped us this year to put something out. But going forward, we would probably need some help to look at ways of how we can actually pull all that stuff together in a cohesive way and use it to the benefit for future concerts, rather than, as James says, just throwing a whole pile of videos up on YouTube. It'll get lost. So maybe something a wee bit more targeted, whether it's a case of putting some edits together and say posting them throughout the year, not just on YouTube, but other social media channels that we've got, to just keep building that interest, as James said, in the run up to the next festivals. Yeah, I think that's the right way to go. But it would be good, because there is so much footage there, that it would be nice to have it archived properly, and with help with people who are more experienced at it. It certainly would help us, because as far as I know, Ian, we're probably going to keep going and keep filming the festivals as we go on, because every year's unique. There's always new people, new bands, new artists playing, so every year's different, so there'll always be fresh content there going forward. So it'd be good to get it, collated together properly and for the benefit of us.
Mm-hmm. And actually, because I think there's the archive footage you produce for the festival, but the rest of the year, do you find there's any opportunities to develop film bands as part of promotion, or as collaborate to sort of produce extra footage?
I think that was probably something that happened this year because of the situation, that a lot of bands took it upon themselves to film themselves and produce little mini concerts or live sessions. It would maybe be good to kind of get in contact with some of these artists and see if they'd be willing to share with us, and then hopefully maybe build up relationships on the back of that, and invite them down whenever we can next have a real festival, you know. Or if things are still the same, well, we can invite them back and get them to do more sessions. But yeah.
Okay. Hannah, I'll bring you back in, because one of your projects that you presented was partly regarding building an archive of artifacts and stories from Dunoon Borough Hall. What can you share about that experience and the challenges and opportunities that relate to wider digital archiving?
I think one of the things I maybe mentioned during that presentation was that we worked with a number of small organisations as well. So it wasn't just the stuff from direct from the hall, it was also from other organisations in the area that have basically voluntary run, haven't got many resources themselves, and don't necessarily have archives. The Masons actually are really good at archiving. The Masonic Lodge was a really good source, and they had lots of stuff to share with us as well. And the newspaper archive is just accessible locally as well. What's really interesting, or kind of worrying, I suppose, is that there is no, I mean, I know Live Argyle actually have an archive locally. We really didn't access much from that, but you know, the sort of community heritage organisations, I think, have a lot of stuff, but need support, I think, to sort of really think about how to make that more accessible to people, because into the future, particularly because of COVID, I think it's going to be really crucial to their ongoing role and development. And I think that was a bit of a challenge, was actually how do we work with these small organisations? And I think some of the projects and some of the things I'm really interested in is how do we use projects to bring organisations together to develop joint resources? And I think archives are actually one way of doing that. My concern is that a lot of good work that's happened, that's been funded over the last sort of 10 years that since I've been living here, and I've seen some brilliant projects, is there isn't any central repository within this area where you can look, because I think organisations doing it themselves, that's one thing, and I think that can be really good for the organisations, but actually if we're talking about place and we're talking about connection, it would be really good to see organisations collaborate on some of these things as well, because I think that is how people coming to the community see it. They don't see it as individual organisations, they see it as a place. And I think, you know, we've got to be thinking about how to utilise those resources, how to turn out education resources for local people as well as visitors as well. So I've got lots of thoughts on it. I haven't got any answers because I think all of it takes money and time, and you're working with a sector that, you know, hasn't got all of those things. So it's really challenging. But I think small things, I think we've got, I mean, I know a couple of people locally that are actually sort of working on archive projects now, not in this area, sadly, but in other areas, and really, you know, how do we develop historic archives and stuff so that live locally as well. So there's lots of expertise here as well. So hopefully that will get better into the future.
Yeah. But I think hearing you talk about the project and just even having a process that engages with an archive creates all these different insights that are shareable, and it can be quite, and I think because I've been doing these one-to-one mapping sessions with a lot of individual practitioners, and a lot of them are inspired by local heritage or things from there's so much of history in the region and sort of social history as well, that when they discover these archives, they want to work with them, they want to do work with them.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, I think there's so much. I mean, just the small, I mentioned two things that had emerged out of research, and you know, the building stuff, the discovery of the Viking in the window, and Margaret, I love Margaret Parker. But those stories will just get lost again, you know, if there's not a way of collating them. And I think because there is this element of community and like involvement in it, you know, like I think it's really worthy of it being supported, and it's a discovery that, you know, was made together with people, and I think that's just so important. That's why these projects, you know, like that's their role, is to make these connections. But I worry that, I mean, stuff is on my website and on links, but there is, you know, at this point, all of those stories could very quickly disappear, unless we find a way of, you know, it's really, I suppose, a return on investment as well. It's actually going, we've, you know, because a lot of these projects that I work on are funded, they, you know, so they're funded through things. And if we don't figure out a way of retaining and sorting and making those things accessible, then that funding kind of doesn't get exploited to its full potential. So, yeah.
So seeing a real case to invest in that engagement with archives and preservation and celebration of them as well.
Yeah, and creation of place and stories. I mean, everyone's talking about that, but it, you know, and I think bringing together organisations to really think deeply about how to achieve that in an area-based way is, you know, because there's so many fascinating facts that you can get off people just sitting in the basement of the museum for a cup of tea. It's brilliant, but you're just like, we've got to capture this stuff, or that's the delight in working with organisations like that. But if it's not captured in some way, then no one else is ever going to know that, and those stories are never going to be told, you know. So yeah, it's quite compelling to me that something needs to get done. But,
oh yeah, I'm listening. So actually, one of the comments came through was about Dunedin Borough Hall, who are in the process of consolidating their document, images and video resources into one shareable storage solution with backup offsite storage. So I think, Ian, that might be one of the examples alongside Mull Kintyre, where Charts just signposts, offers a sort of, whether it's a directory as the word we were using earlier, or some way for making people more aware and promoting and stimulating people to engage with these things. I think all of a sudden opportunities emerge. So we're already coming up very quickly there towards 8:30, and actually Hannah's appeal there towards engagement with archives does link in well with our workshop that we're also running on Thursday. So as part of this engagement work with the collaboration between Glasgow School of Art and Charts, we not only have webinars that try and talk about, share the stories, frame some of these topics, but also workshops that we invite people with ideas or resources or things that they'd like to open up for collaboration to come along to these online workshops and just meet other people, share their idea, find a way for it to be developed. And the one on Thursday does focus on digital archives. So we will aim to share some examples of how digital archives have been done or can work, and then use that to start proposing ideas that in the long run, we aim to be stimulating proposals to the Create Networks Fund as part of this wider program. So we will be releasing the call for that very soon. It's not open just yet, but we're aiming to fund 3 creative collaborations, placemaking collaborations across Argyll and Isles, which have a model that is about, read up the details because I'm trying to remember them off by heart, but I think it's around £3,000 to fund an individual 1 day a week for 6 months to coordinate that collaboration, and then a further £2,500 to spend on the project itself. So we're hoping to support 3 of those starting in December, January time. And so the workshop is the first of 5 that we'll be doing that under themes, try and promote some of these ideas for proposals. I should stipulate at this point that one of the provisos for being able to apply for funding is engagement in either the one-to-one mapping sessions I've been delivering or these workshops and webinars, and that you need to be a Charts member, obviously. So just want to offer that stipulation. But check out the Charts news and opportunities pages. They'll provide the information about that. Otherwise, yes, I think that's us all wrapped up. Thank you very much. Just to mention, this has been recorded, this webinar. We're going to make it available later on for people to re-engage. So if you really enjoyed this, if you think other people you know would really enjoy this, then please signpost them to this webinar as well. And hopefully the more stories we share, the more peer support we can provide, the the stronger the whole creative and cultural sector in Argyll and Isles is going to be. Thank you to all my panelists. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Hopefully we'll see you again in future events. Bye, everyone.